Hello and welcome to the next webinar in the series brought to you by Strengthening the Heartland. This is our how-to series and we're really happy to have you with us today. Before I introduce our speaker, I have a couple announcements, some logistics for you as we go through the presentation. The first one being, if you'd like to follow along with the presentation, there are a couple of handouts in your handout portion. And if at any time during the presentation you have a question for our speaker, you can go ahead and type those into the chat box. I will relay those to our speaker. Feel free to type them in at the end of the presentation, or if you have a question during the course of the presentation, feel free to do that as well. Lastly, we do like your feedback after each of these presentations, so you'll also see a survey link. After we finish, feel free to click on that link and give us some feedback. It's a great place for us to hear from you what you'd like to see in future webinars. You may have taken these surveys with previous webinars, but we do ask that you take them each time just so we can hear your new ideas. But with that, I'm going to turn it over to our presenter today. This is Dr. Goali Saedi Bocci, and she's going to talk to us a little bit about some digital detox strategies. So welcome, Dr. Bocci.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here. All right, so I think I can go ahead and get us started. So,
yes.
I think that, again, I'm so excited to be talking about this today. And, when we sort of started, brainstorming about this presentation, of course, it was a pre-COVID world. And so, that's something that's a modification that we have really sort of integrate that. But I know that we also have a lot of other protest movements, just things going on in the country, and that is, of course, impacting our teenagers as well. That's something that is coming up on social media, on their phones. And so as we go through this presentation, I will definitely be addressing those factors as well. Something also that's important to sort of know before we kind of get started is that, a lot of the resources that I will be talking about, they are all a resource right there. There are books, things like that. I was joking a little bit earlier that I did my very first go-to webinar this past weekend for a maternity class. And so having all these technical issues, right? And so they say the important thing is, and there's no audio. So I want you all to relax and know that all of the information is going to be there. This is going to be recorded. So if there's anything that you don't get, you can go back and get it. And I say that because I am always the anxious participant myself. So again, I want us to sort of enjoy any questions that come up. I'll leave time at the end. So with that, we'll go ahead and get started. So quick introduction to myself. So I'm Dr. Goali Saedi Bocci. I'm a licensed clinical psychologist. I primarily do work with teenagers. And so, throughout the presentation, I'll be talking a lot about kind of, little case vignettes and things that come up, things that I've really learned along the way in working with teenagers. I'm also the author of two resources that I will be kind of tapping into throughout the presentation. So I have Digital Detox Card Deck, and then I have Social Media Workbook. So one way that I kind of like to really conceptualize it is the workbook is sort of the full meal deal protocol, right? And so with teens, I know a lot of times they're strapped for time and, I've got homework, I've got things going on. And so that's why I have the card deck. So in an ideal world, they will go through the full protocol, but we kind of know, depending on who we're working with, what kind of the time parameters are. But again, I'll be tapping into both of them. And I will say, as a therapist working a lot with teens, that summer I find is some of the best time to really do these interventions, especially if school falls away. So again, I'm really excited that we're presenting now in June, where a lot of teens are sort of like, what am I going to be doing this summer, right? Because a lot of camps are canceled, a lot of kids are at home. Again, not that we want to like drill them with interventions initially with summer and be like, great, now is the time to get your skills. But it can be a great time to be doing these things that, during the school year, oftentimes can sort of fall to the wayside. So I'm going to start with a little bit of just kind of a brief overview, because I know when I attend a presentation, I don't know what's coming, right? So kind of a 4-step. So we're going to start with just some basic statistics, getting the lay of the land and really the why. Anyone who works with teens knows they want to know why, right? They want to know why is this relevant? Why is this important? You know, why are you having me do this? And so this is, you know, kind of setting up that framework. And then really I kind of go into a 4-step detox, de-stress, distract, and discover, and we'll kind of go through all those pieces. It does not have to happen in this order. This is just an order that can feel sort of logical. But again, if you're kind of like, you know what, I think the teams that I'm working with need to de-stress or they need to discover, by all means, feel free. But again, for me, this is sort of how it kind of builds a little bit. And then moving into organizations and resources. So I will kind of, you know, a brief story that I'll share now is, why did I even get into this work? So doing therapy, parents were at a wit's end. So I had parents of middle schoolers, high schoolers being like, this is the devil, right? Gotta throw it away. And there's, you know, a lot of cyberbullying going on and just all sorts of distractions and, you know, feeling like when they took away the phone, the child would have a temper tantrum. So there was a lot going on. And when I started looking for resources at that time, there were no resources. There were no books that I could really say, oh, I know, here's this workbook, right? So whereas I have resources for depression, anxiety, ADHD, you name it, I think phones and devices were just so new. There really wasn't anything to turn to. The really exciting thing now is there are tons of organizations, resources. An organization I'll talk about kind of at the end, they kind of do these detox summer camps for kids. So again, that world has really grown, and that's kind of neat to know because that really helps join the work that we're doing, right? So it's not just one facet, but we have all these other supports that can really help us when we're talking about digital detox for teens. So we'll talk about that, and then again, further readings for teens and adults, and I will tell you why I'm going to talk about adults also. And then a couple of my publications I have done recently on teens and COVID, and just kind of self-care, finding the new normal, and we'll talk a little bit about that at the end of the presentation as well. So, teens versus adults. So, you know, I think we can be very quick to put the blame on our teenagers when we are culprits as well. So I think it's important as we go through this entire presentation, yes, we're saying teens, but it's also about us, you know. So a joke that I've been making is we recently moved in the midst of this, you know, pandemic, and my boomer parents have been helping us, and I have been amazed how much time they spend on their devices. Like it's literally like my parents are teenagers, and they're like, look at this app, look at this gift, and I'm like, oh my god, you know, you're just on your devices all day. And so again, we are very guilty, and if anything, I would even say, you know, for this next hour, try to put your phone away. Try, you know, because it's so easy for us to multitask, to be like, oh yeah, I'm doing this webinar, let me just go on my phone and do this thing. But to really, again, practice what we preach, you know, because teens are looking at us, they're looking at our behaviors and what we're doing. And so we have to really be the role models. And again, when I talk about, you know, family culture change, things like that, it really is a team effort, right? So again, you know, I'm a big fan of infographics. I think they look pretty. So this is, you know, one way that I found online, pulling from the Pew Research Center. And I will say Pew does an amazing job. I have some updated statistics from them in 2018 that I'll also be sharing. But I mean, as you see, as adults, we're using more Twitter, we're using more Instagram, we're using more Pinterest. So again, and these could change over time of kind of who's using what, but it kind of gives a sense that we are right up there along with teens. And then also the age breakdown. I will say, I find it to be funny that the 65-year-old has like a walker. It seems a little ageist to me. I don't know how accurate that is because both of my parents are in that age category, and we're no walkers yet, fortunately. But again, the idea that we're all, you know, very much using these tools and just something to be aware of. So again, I'm looking at how many teens are using phones, how many teens actually have access, and the fact that they're online quite a bit. If you were to ask me, I would say the 45% of teens being online there constantly is an understatement. From what I have really witnessed, they can be online quite a bit more. I had one of my teenagers, and again, I'm so grateful when they are just open and vulnerable and honest. And one of them said, you know, I have them do the screen time feature, and I think they were on their phone like 8 hours a day, right? That's a long, long time. So again, something to be aware of. And then 54% of teens reporting that if their parents knew more about what was going on, they would be worried about it, right? And so again, pretty concerning stuff. Again, I highly recommend Pew Research Center. They do an amazing job of constantly updating this kind of information. So a couple of the quick things to touch on: distracted teen driving statistics, right? Again, another reason of the why. I can tell you how many teens I've had that, we're doing therapy, they're in driver's ed. They're terrified, they're anxious. We talk about the fear of changing lanes and, and here in Portland, Oregon, parallel parking. I still don't parallel park, right? And so when you're trying to do this all with a device in your hand, how dangerous that can become, right? But a lot of times, and that's where, as parents, as educators, we need to have these conversations too. Of, you know what? Pull over, stop the car, then call me and let me know that you need it, right? And so, again, another reason why looking at digital detox is so important. Cyberbullying. So girls are twice as likely to be bullied as boys, a big problem. Suicide, we have many, many reports in the media of teens who have committed suicide after being bullied heavily. So we know on Instagram, we have like the Simsta, that's the secondary Insta. That's oftentimes the secret private one they don't tell their parents about. So they have the curated one of, look, mom and dad, I'm not doing anything bad. And then they have all these other ones. And that is where the cyberbullying can happen. And it's important to be aware of that. The fact that only 1 in 10 will report a cyberbully attack, right? How many teens who have either been a part of it or witnessed it or seeing it happening, right? So again, as you're talking to your teens about why digital detox, why this is important, these are life and death issues, right? When you're talking about distracted driving, when you're talking about suicide, depression, anxiety, all of that, this is critical stuff. And so again, I think it helps set the stage. So what about COVID-19, right? How does that fit into all of this? We know online content consumption is up across all industries, right? And that's in a way a good and a bad thing, right? So people could be learning more. Like I had one of my teams that was really cute. She said that she was doing like this master class type of thing and learning from a screenplay writer. And she's like, and I finally have time and it's so exciting. And so again, this could be a time of great enrichment, but they're spending so much time on screens because they're doing homework that way. It can be very taxing. People are talking about the whole Zoom fatigue. That's a real thing, right? And sleep cycle disturbance because of the blue light emitting. I can tell you how many teens and even parents are saying that they are not sleeping well the way that they used to. And then, of course, there's anxiety about COVID. There's anxiety about the pandemic and what does it mean for my life? What does it mean for the future? But when you're on the screen all day long, that's not helping us, right? And so it's important to be aware of that, and that it's not as simple as just get rid of all your screens, because now they have to use it for their homework. They have to use it to be doing things. Social distancing, another huge, huge issue for teens, right? Because the teenage years, we know it's all about being social. It's all about their friends, and it's more than just connecting via social media. Again, there's a lot of this fear and anxiety of, what if I don't see my friends again? What if I don't go to school again? What's going to happen? Here in Oregon, it was pretty concerning because yesterday we had our highest ever count since the whole thing began. We had 146 new cases in June, right? And so we were just coming out of quarantine. So the anxiety comes in of, oh my gosh, how much longer is this going to go on? And so it's important that as we talk about digital detox, all of that, to really be aware that there could be some pushback, right? Well, if this is the only way I can talk to my friends, I'm not going to look at my phone. My phone is my lifeline, And so we want to be very empathic and sensitive to their needs regarding that. So again, also disruption of regular routines, schedules. I'm seeing a lot with a lot of my teens where, they're feeling like I'm sleeping in until noon because I can, and then their sleep is messed up. They're not exercising, they're not eating really well, everything's kind of in flux. And so again, as we talk about these things, it's all a cluster that goes together. And so when you talk about the detox, I will kind of talk about the wellness trifecta that's in the handouts that you all have. So again, things to sort of consider as we're talking about the detox. So step 1, finally diving into the real content. So detox is about assessing, it's about decluttering, and it is about dumping. So a quote that I love here from Dana Boyd, very well-known book, It's Complicated: The Social Lives of Network Teens. She says most teens aren't addicted to social media. If anything, they're addicted to each other, right? And so this word addiction will come up a lot, I think, and we can use it very cavalier, the way that we go about it. And so I think it's important to really be aware of, is it not, that's not really the point. The point is, how much time am I really using on my devices? And so this, I will say, I took it right from the social media workbook, and I have a little bit of a how do you kind of go through and score it? But again, it just gets teens thinking about this, and you want them to be as open and honest as possible, right? And so the idea, do you become restless, troubled when you can't use your devices? I have seen that a lot, right? Where there are some teenagers where their reaction to getting their phone taken away, it is like, not unlike somebody who is addicted to alcohol, and you take away the alcohol and there is just a complete falling apart, And again, this is where I encourage you to think about yourself. I mean, my husband and I, every time we go on vacation, we're in a rental car, things kind of get misplaced. He thought he lost his phone and lost it, right? And so I was like, okay, let's breathe. Let's use the Find My Phone app, right? And he's like, I never set up the Find My Phone app. I never did, I don't have an iCloud account. I was like, okay, I can't help you, right? That's not there. This wife is no longer helpful. But again, the idea that we all have that moment of panic. Oh my God, I left the house without my phone. And so we are becoming pretty dependent on these devices. And that's part of the detox, is really being able to move away from that and not necessarily have to just be so glued to our phones. I mean, I always say we all have our phones within a foot or two of us at all times. I have my phone right here. Again, do I need it here? Probably not. But yet, lo and behold, there it is. So something to kind of start that conversation. I'm a huge, huge fan of the Chance Theoretical Stages of Change model. Many of you may be already familiar with it, but if not, I'll just kind of very briefly go over it. It comes from the health psychology literature, and I love it. It's for changing behavior. So a lot of smoking cessation, weight loss, starting an exercise routine, things of that nature, right? And so the idea is we start with the pre-contemplation stage. That's when we are problem? What problem? I have half of a chocolate cake every day. Not a big deal, right? Contemplation is when we're like, maybe that chocolate cake is not something I should be having every single day. Preparation is, okay, maybe I can have healthy muffins instead. Let me get some recipes. Let me figure this out. Action, right? We're moving into the actual change of, okay, putting away the chocolate cake, having the healthy muffins instead. Maintenance, right? How we're going to kind of maintain that behavior, and the relapse prevention, ideally, right? So with a lot of teenagers, luckily, I have experienced they're in contemplation, right? There are some who are pre-contemplation where they're like, phone, I don't have a problem. Now, Billy, he has a problem. Sarah, she has a problem. I don't have a problem. But when you start digging deeper, they will start to really admit, it is a little stressful when the group messages are going off every 5 seconds. Not a lot of fun, right? Or, I had a client, she'd been waiting so long to go to Hawaii with her family. I mean, all winter, especially here in Oregon, where it gets so dreary, she was like, going to Hawaii, finally, right? So they get there in March, super excited, they're about to go to this amazing dinner, and she gets a nasty message on social media, right? The entire dinner, I mean, just the whole trip went downhill. And I remember her mother sharing this with me and being like, I don't know what happened, but it was one of those kind of bullying comments that were not very nice. And, that's what we were saying. Sometimes phones don't go on vacations, right? They don't come with us. We need to set those boundaries. And so again, being aware of where are we in these phases, and usually teens can identify being in a contemplation mode. And so again, I will say that, as we're working with different folks, some are more ready to be in the action phase, some are ready to prepare and think about it. And so again, these are the pieces to sort of consider when talking about detox. So handout that you have, the family meeting agenda, right? This is the how of what is the plan? What are we changing? What are we all changing, right? So because we do need a culture that supports that change. I always say the worst thing is when, parents say, teens, you can't be on your devices, but I'm going to be on my iPad every single morning reading the New York Times, right? And so part of that conversation is, well, you know what, maybe we actually get a hard copy of the New York Times and we put away the devices. I mean, I know that I have done that. If I started, I subscribe to Country Living Magazine and Oprah Magazine and all these, different things, because it's so easy that when you're feeling sort of restless to go to the phone, right? And so talking about that family culture of change, connecting with friends, you've got to let them know. So if you are, let's say, my goal is I'm not going to be on my phone past 8 o'clock at night. I got to let my friends know, because if they are going to be expecting me to get back to them, I need to say, hey guys, I need to take a break from social media. I need to take a break from my devices. Either it's because I want to or my parents are making me, whatever it may be. You got to have that conversation. Goal setting for change, a lot of us have heard this. We want SMART goals, right? So we want them to be specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, time bound. So I joke that you always know how invested a team is in making a goal when they're like, yeah, I'll use my phone less. I'm like, that doesn't mean anything. that literally means nothing, right? So you need to tell me exactly what you're doing. Are we getting rid of your Instagram app? Are we getting rid of Snapchat? Are we, putting the phone away for periods of time? Are you sleeping in your room without your phone in there? So you got to be really specific. And this is where I highly encourage folks to have the team set the agenda, right? Because what we set for them will backfire. But oftentimes they will identify like, I don't need my Instagram. Instagram's been kind of difficult, or I need to block certain people, or an easy one, taking it off of your phone, but having it on a computer or whatever it may be, right? So just these little things that help us to kind of detox, be less reliant on our devices. So again, the biggest piece is a focus on our overall wellness. So the trifecta of team health. I always say sleep, diet, and exercise, they go hand in hand. The handout also talks a lot about sort of how they relate to one another, right? So if I'm getting really poor sleep because I'm on my phone all night long, I wake up and I'm groggy. So I'm going to go for the waffles instead of a fruit smoothie, right? And then once I've gone for the waffles and I'm feeling kind of gross, I'm not going to be exercising, right? At least that's what I'm going to do. But when I have my smoothie, I'm like, yeah, I can go. I'm going to, again, not that I'm some super athlete by any means. I would go for my power walk or my elliptical or whatever it is. But how all of these things really fit together, right? So removal and replacement of excess screens and text. So, between the Apple Watch and the iPhone and the tablet and the laptop and the desktop and all of the myriad tools, you don't need all of them, right? And so kind of thinking about what can I get rid of, what can I declutter, what can I donate, whatever it may be. Again, deleting of apps. I know that was something that for me early on, I'm now largely off of social media, but it was, let me get rid of Facebook on my phone, let me get rid of Instagram on my phone. They're not helping me, right? They're really not helping me. And it's very easy. Again, it's muscle memory. You just hit it without even thinking about it. And you're reading a feed without even being conscious of the fact that you're doing it. That's an easy one to do. Buy an alarm clock. So the reason I say that, it's really funny because when I wrote the detox deck, one of the big complaints somebody made was like, buy an alarm clock, that's the stupidest advice I've ever heard. And I'm like, you gotta hear me out. From the therapist perspective, that is the first line of attack from any team, right? Of when you say, don't sleep with your phone, but I can't get up in the morning. I need my phone. My phone is my alarm. I mean, I haven't checked the prices of alarm clocks lately, but I don't think that they're cost prohibitive. And so again, reduce your dependency, right? Get a regular camera. If you want to check the weather, maybe check the weather channel on TV. Again, whatever it is that can reduce that need of, I need my phone with me, right? And that's where I oftentimes talk about the tech-free weekend. Is a beautiful time to experience that, right? So speaking of my client's Hawaii trip, I will say the first time I ever went to Hawaii was when I was, well into grad school, and I was so excited. It was like dream trip ever, right? And so we all at the Portland airport turned off our phones, right? And it was literally, that was kind of when phones were kind of, not to sound ancient, but it was kind of when phones were really kind of becoming more common, the iPhone at least. And so it was this really interesting, week period where we were like, we can't check the weather, we can't check our voicemails or text messages, and it was just this really odd thing. But what better place to do than when you're on vacation, right? Or when you're camping and there is no reception, that's even better. I mean, I think that's become more of a trend in travel, right? Is sometimes these hotels that literally have no Wi-Fi, and it's on purpose, right? Or they will have quiet zones and you can't be on your phone because we have become so accustomed all of the time. And so again, I think especially during, social distancing, everyone being home, very easy to say, hey, you know what, let's do Saturday and Sunday, no technology, right? And at the beginning, it can feel like, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? Are we going to stare at each other? But you will realize there was a time before phones, and whether it's puzzles or baking or cooking or going for a run, whatever it may be, those are the things that are important to start implementing that help with the detox element. So step 2, moving to de-stressing. And I will say the de-stress, I see it as kind of this, sort of two-part piece. There's a level of stress of, oh my gosh, I can't have my devices. This is terrifying to me. So the stressors of just being a teenager, right? It's stressful enough being a teen. Now we have pandemic. Now we have protests and social unrest going on. So there's a lot of anxiety that we're dealing with, right? And so to me, these are skills that really hit at both. But again, it's important to recognize that a detox in and of itself can increase anxiety significantly on top of everything else that they're already going through. So speaking of anxiety, right, from the National Institutes of Health, nearly 1 in 3 adolescents ages 13 to 18 will experience an anxiety disorder, right? So we know very widespread, something super common, getting to be more all the time. So again, recognition that COVID-19 is an added stressor on top of existing burdens. I can't tell you how many therapy sessions I've had in the last couple of months of graduation, canceled, right? Spring break, canceled. One of my clients, huge movie buff, she's like, when can I go to the theater again, right? I love going to the movies. Concerts, will they ever happen again? I have a client, she's supposed to do a study abroad in Europe in college. We don't know if that's going to happen. And for a lot of teens, when they have so much pressure, they need these things to look forward to. And when they don't have that, that's when hopelessness sets in, right? And I often think of depression as hopelessness largely, right? What is there in the future that I have to get excited about? What is there that I can look forward to? And so that's something we will kind of talk about at the end when we talk about the new normal. But again, it's important to be aware that these are the things that are kind of cycling in everyone's minds. And as adults, we've all experienced different. I mean, again, we were, selling a home in the middle of a pandemic. My sister's wedding got canceled. I mean, we've all had these things that we've had to deal with, these inconveniences or tragedies in many cases, right? And so to be thinking of those things. And so the focus really is on the small things we can do, small rewards that we can give ourselves. A book that I highly, highly recommend is called Simple Self-Care for Therapists by Ashley Davis Bush. So I always say, whether you're a therapist or not, I love her general look at micro self-care versus macro self-care. So micro, that's the stuff that a lot of us are already familiar with. So things like a spa day at home. Most of us, let's be real, are not going to the salon anyway anytime soon. So we're all DIYing our meals and our hair, whatever it is. But also things like, again, she breaks it down into relaxing, grounding, and energizing. So things like hiking, gardening, going for a brisk walk, doing yoga. Those are the daily forms of self-care. She has a really nice chapter about this person who does like a tea ceremony every afternoon, right? A therapist. And it's like they have their piece of dark chocolate and their cup of tea and they savor it every single day. And I love that. That's like that small way of caring for yourself. The macro, that's kind of the bigger stuff, the rarer stuff. So that's the stuff like the vacations, but also excursions, right? I think of the seasons as a really nice way of marking it. So, fall, winter, spring, summer. So in the fall, you might be going to a pumpkin patch or a tree farm. And I will say that I think with social distancing, we can still do those things, right? Because I think we are going to be out and about in nature and fresh air. So I imagine that we can actually do those kinds of things. But it could be that some people, depending on kind of where in the country you are, it might be time that you can go skiing or snowboarding or whatever it might be, camping, these things that you might not be doing all of the time, but that you can really look forward to. These are the things, again, you start thinking about how we're talking about de-stressing, right? It's just the basic self-care. Tech time management, another important piece, and this is, again, part of what we can kind of talk to our teams about in terms of motivating them, is because they're all aware of how time disappears when they're on their devices, right? And that can also cause a lot of anxiety. So with school being moved online, you would think that a lot of teens would have more time, but I've experienced a lot of teens who are now watching Netflix all day, right? And they're doing all the other things. And so suddenly they're realizing, uh-oh, I have this big exam or I have an AP test coming up or whatever it may be. So this is not an original, the time management matrix. It's from Stephen Covey, and so he talks a lot about the idea of what's urgent and not urgent, important and not important. And so I do have this in the book, kind of modified to teenagers, right? So we know obviously what's urgent and important. What oftentimes a lot of teens will spend their time on though is the not important, not urgent, and that's all of the phone time, all of the screen time, right? So this is, to me, again, I'm a big visual learner. This is a really beautiful way of illustrating, hey, all of your time going here, is it important? Is it urgent? Right? And so again, it might be a little bit more important to exercise and to eat well and to be healthy and to get outside and get fresh air. Might not be urgent, but it's still important, which would put it higher in the hierarchy as opposed to being on your phone. So again, another piece that can sort of be helpful when we're talking to our teenagers. Another piece of de-stressing, journaling versus tweeting is another intervention that I talk a lot about. And so teens love to broadcast, they love to express themselves, and there's nothing wrong with the old-fashioned journal. And I can't tell you how many teens will say, oh, I have a journal app. There's an app for that, right? And so again, when we're trying to get off of our screens, that's not what we're trying to do right now. And so I say, you know what, how about good old, paper and pencil? And, they'll say, well, what do I journal about? What do I, do? I do it in a number of ways, right? It might be a gratitude list. It might be writing down what their stressors are. So it could just be like a worry time type of intervention. I've had sometimes, especially with my male clients, they'll sort of say, oh, journaling, that's girly. I don't want to do a journal. So, I had a football player one time and he did bullets. He's like, I'm just gonna write bullets. Is that okay? I'm like, that works, right? But by doing the bullets, for example, we were able to see, because he was always getting anxious in the afternoon, what was happening in the afternoon, right? Football practice, getting into an argument with his girlfriend. These were the things that were kind of weighing on him. And when he had his bulleted list, we were able to identify what are the triggers, what are the stressors coming in, right? So CBT intervention, so cognitive behavioral therapy, I'm a big fan. I love how it just really kind of breaks down the thinking patterns we can get into. So I will say, Dr. Strokes could literally be a presentation unto themselves. We're not going to do that. But I will say, again, the resources below. An example is, things like catastrophizing, black and white thinking, expecting perfection. These are all the thinking traps we get into. And I always love to say, as adults, we have been doing them our whole lives. I did not learn about this until I was in my 20s. So for teens to be exposed to this early on, I always say, wow, I wish I had this knowledge when I was your age, right? And again, it's lovely too when we can go through and explain, we all do this, right? And a lot of it comes from different messages that we might get throughout our lives. So I will oftentimes say, growing up in my family, it was like, you either got an A or it was failure, right? And so that's black and white thinking. That's a form of stressful thinking that does not help us, right? So again, I have a COVID-19 example here, so catastrophizing. This will never end, I'll be trapped at home forever. Not reality. But if you, as a teen, keep saying this over and over, your anxiety and panic will rise. And so thought distortions are all about taking it apart. So a sample thought log is provided in the handout, right, of going through feelings, of thoughts, of action plan, and what is an actual thought distortion. So again, another really important, helpful tool that I think teens really tend to kind of respond pretty positively to. So step 3 is the distraction. So this is what we oftentimes think of as emotion regulation skills. A lot of this comes from Marcia Linehan's work from dialectical behavioral therapy, and granted, that was really sort of developed for borderline personality disorder. Over time, a lot of adaptations have been made because there is some incredible work there that we kind of used in other domains. But again, just something to kind of think about, because I know when I think emotion regulation, that's sort of what I think about initially. So another quote that I found I really love, the age in which we live, this nonstop distraction is making it more impossible for the younger generation to ever have curiosity or discipline, because you need to be able to be alone to find out anything, right? So we need to find ways to not just distract ourselves, but really to turn inward. So I kind of talked about this a little bit earlier, reading books, not feeds. I can't tell you how many clients, again, I love that when they're honest about it, they say they can mindlessly scroll. They're just not even aware. You know, I have a client say, yeah, I was sitting in the waiting room and I was scrolling and I wasn't even thinking about it. Like, what am I seeing? What am I reading? And to me, it's a little scary because it's sort of, what are all these unconscious messages that we're sort of bringing into our lives all the time and being a mindless consumer? We're not critically thinking, And so it's the same argument that was made forever ago about, TV and commercials, what's the hidden meaning behind commercials or whatever it may be. Same thing goes for our news feeds. And we know now to a lot of advertisers, right? They're getting a sense of what are we interested in. I'm getting like a million ads for like baby clothes all the time and all the things that I'm supposedly gonna need. And of course, being the gullible person that I am, I always click, I'm like, oh my God, that's so cute. And so again, you just gotta be really aware. And so that's why I would say it's important to kind of move away from the devices and to kind of say, hey, what are magazines you like? What are newspapers, books, periodicals, other non-screen based forms of reading? A lot of research and articles are coming out that our attention spans are going down, right? And you're even seeing it in the way that films are made, right? So, my husband has been on a James Bond kick lately for whatever reason during quarantine. So when you look at old James Bond versus new James Bond, drastically different, right? So movies from, 30, 40 years ago were slow, panning, one cut, right? And now it's like cut, cut, cut. And, you just see how, and that's partly because of our attention spans, right? People get bored, we got to keep them entertained, and we don't want to be creating this sort of ADHD brain for ourselves. There are authors who say that they're not reading entire books anymore. My for experience, a lot of times, of course, they're reading textbooks. And so they're feeling like, oh my God, I don't want to do any other reading. But again, I encourage them, what? Find one of my male clients, he was like, I love National Geographic. I was like, that's great, and he said, but I don't have time for it. I said, what, just read little snippets. If every month you can read one National Geographic article, that is an accomplishment, right? And so, again, finding things. I have a client, she's rereading Harry Potter. Fantastic, right? We want to, again, get them off of the feeds. I started, in my own life, having a little paperback in my purse because it's so easy when you're in line, sitting, or you're in your car to go to your phone, right? That's become the normal thing. So also, again, the more we read, it can also help with academics, right? So there's an added bonus there too. So another thing, getting distracted without devices. So again, tracking mindless time that we spend on devices. Screen time features on phones can really help us. And that's a really nice way of doing some goal setting around, am I spending 2 hours on my phone? Am I spending 1 hour on my phone? How much time on social media? And really kind of being aware of that. Developing new hobbies. That's a huge one, right? So, and again, with COVID-19, people are buying craft kits, they're cooking, everyone's making banana bread, right? Everyone's doing puzzles. And so this is actually a prime time to start learning how to do these things. So it feeds in beautifully with a digital detox. Again, the focus being on screen-free entertainment. You've always got to have a puppy photo in any presentation. So top therapy, this is our multi-poo terror. So again, walking him, spending time playing with the dog, training the dog, all things. And again, I can't tell you how many of my teams, it's the neat thing, I do therapy with them online. There's always an animal somewhere, right? There's like a cat walking across the keyboard. There's a dog barking. You probably have a dog at your foot somewhere right now, but again, we can. I know we're oftentimes like terrible pet parents. He's like, I just want to be with you all the time. Spending that time, right? Getting off of our devices and actually spending time with them. So another piece, right? Getting bored on purpose. And this is a conversation I've been having with, one of my parents. I've been doing kind of family therapy a little bit, and we've been talking about the idea of getting bored on purpose. So the parent says to me, I worry that my child cannot handle boredom, right? And a lot of teens are like that because the phone, you're bored, you go to your phone. You don't feel well, you go to your phone. It's become the ultimate babysitter. So flow theory, from positive psychologist Csikszentmihalyi. Love flow theory. And it's basically kind of a fancy word for being in the zone, right? So the idea of when the challenge level is high, the skill level is high, we can hit flow, right? And so it's like when you're playing a piece on the piano and you're lost in the music. In my case, it's when I'm baking and I'm just like in the zone, I'm putting things together and I'm not even thinking about it. People doing artwork, a lot of runners, when they're kind of in that space, they're in the zone. And so to me, flow is really kind of an antidote to boredom, right? And so again, and we feel great when we are in flow. I read a quote recently from Csikszentmihalyi that was saying that, some of the pinnacles of the human experience, they're not when we're lying on a beach doing nothing, right? It's when we are engaged. It's when we are actively doing something and feeling that challenge and that accomplishment. So again, flow is a really great thing to start thinking about, talking about. There's a ton of fantastic books on flow that are coming out that I highly recommend as tools as well. So finally, we move into this space of discovery, right? So self-growth. The mind that opens to new ideas never returns to its original size. I like to kind of think about this a little bit like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, which you may or may not already be familiar with. It's basically kind of going to that self-actualization, right? Doing more than we possibly thought that we could. And I think for teens, there's a lot of ways of tapping into that. So again, especially in a time of COVID, moving beyond the individual, right? This is a time that we're seeing people volunteering to help neighbors, the elderly, grocery shopping for the elderly. A lot of working adults are managing kids and being at home with a lot of teenagers being free. They can babysit, right? Distributing meals to those that are in need. I love the movement of sewing masks, right? And donating them. Again, it's kind of doing things that are beyond and outside of yourself, and again, teams will feel fantastic when they're giving back in that way. And a lot of times, really, and I think teens, unfairly get this bad rap of being very me-centered. They're not. I think that oftentimes we're just being told, teachers, educators, do this, do that. They don't have that time to kind of think outside the box. And I have experienced that whenever, we're in therapy and we're saying, have you thought about volunteering for this organization? Or have you thought about that? They're often like, no, I literally have not considered it, right? So it's not at all a sense of selfishness if I don't want to. It's just, I literally didn't think of it and I've never had the time until now. We were talking with one of my teens, he was saying, he's like, I am going crazy. I can't stay in the house any longer. And it turns out he loves to cook and bake. And so we had this whole conversation about, baking cookies. And he was going to start baking cookies and delivering it to his friends who were having a rough time. And I was like, that's great. Again, anything we can do to help others. So openness to the new normal, right? And so this is one that I recently wrote a Psychology Today article on for my column. And so again, this has been a huge conversation that has been happening week after week of what does the new normal look like, right? So when we have graduation canceled, spring break canceled, we don't know what's available. And again, are we going to keep going into quarantine? And I think that's kind of one of the big fears that everyone is having is like, how long will we social distance? And even then, there's a lot of anxiety, especially with my clients who are prone to anxiety. They don't want to go back and get their hair cut. They want to, walk into a grocery store if they don't have to. So, even long after things are, expired or safe to go, I don't know that they'll necessarily be happening. And so a conversation we've been having is, what is one thing every single day that you can look forward to? That can be very easy, it can be safe, it can involve social distancing, but again, it's creating that new normal, right? So I always say, again, supporting small local businesses. So, drive-through coffee. A lot of people, whether it's Starbucks or a local coffee shop or what have you, maybe that's your excursion for Monday, right? Maybe one day a week you go for a walk or a hike. Again, with most of us hopefully heading into summer and warmer weather, is it a social distancing walk? Is it a hike? What are you doing? Wednesdays, picking up pizzas. I have a client who works at a pizza shop and she said, it sounds weird to say, but since COVID, our business is doing fantastic, right? Like everyone wants to get out of the house, everyone wants to come pick up a pizza. And so the curbside pickups and deliveries, right? Again, teens who can drive, who are able to drive, great. Have them do a chore for the family and pick up dinner one night a week, right? tending to a garden one day, an art project, movie nights. So one of my clients was telling me about this app called Netflix Party. So the idea is you can actually watch a Netflix movie with your friends uh, from your own homes, which I thought was fascinating, and I've had some clients, and this is a whole another topic is, people who've been like dating and like doing the whole like match.com, Tinder, or whatever it is, how do you go on a date in the time of, quarantine and social distancing? And things like Netflix Party are a way that we're able to kind of do something together but apart. And, I have a birthday coming up next week, and I was looking at, okay, social distancing birthdays. Like, how do we do this, right? Like, do we sit in the backyard, all this? And, I found this article with like, 10 different things. Granted, it was for kids, but it's all of these different organizations that are saying, well, we used to do this as person, but here are games we can all play. Here are virtual parties that we can do, right? Again, not that we want to be on a screen all of the time, but it's being aware of what are the different things that we can do. So again, it's Saturday, again, as you're getting the sense of I'm a big bakery cake bread person. So I love my carbs. So, going and picking up cinnamon rolls, muffins, whatever it is, supporting your local bakery, on the weekend, a great way again for teens to get involved with the family. Sunday, a lot of spiritual services. So whether, you go to church or you do yoga, that is something that, we're seeing a lot more. I mean, I know that there's a lot of controversy about the whole like opening of churches and is it, necessary, essential or not and all of that. But the reality is, mass gatherings of large groups of people, whether you're in a church or in a yoga studio, right, breathing that same air might be a while until people are feeling comfortable to do those things again, right? But again, I like to think of Sunday as sort of your spiritual day, whether you're meditating or going for a walk, something virtual, reading, meditation, scripture, what have you, could be a great way of doing that. So again, this is just a sample, but something to really, again, as we're talking about the special digital detox, that my days don't, just surround being on a phone or on a screen all day long, right? I have something that's going to get me off of my screen. I can leave my phone, at home when I go for my walk or when I tend to the garden or whatever it is that I'm doing. So a couple organizations also to be aware of, right? So Digital Wellness Collective, I was very impressed, when I went on their site, there were dozens and dozens of organizations, depending on, are you looking at kids and teens and, what are the different resources that we can really tap into, and different types of programming. I did a podcast actually with America Offline, so that's the organization I was saying does the camps. So they were kind of doing this, let's go into the woods and be away from our phones, which I think, how fantastic is that? And of course, with COVID and camps being canceled, they have moved a lot of these things online. But again, that's where, where we're having this conversation about how do we detox, knowing what we're screen, and again, how do we create that space? Children and Teens Institute of Digital Media and Child Development, they're actually doing a lot of research and grants and conferences. So a great academic site to be able to tap into as well. So again, a couple things to think about there. A lot of fantastic books for teens. So I have a couple of them up here. Below Kids Screen-wise, it's complicated. All, I've had a lot of parents read them, heard rave reviews. Also, again, for adults, I did read The Power of Off and Outsmart Your Smartphone, found them to be fantastic. I like with Outsmart Your Smartphone, they talk a lot about values, right? So it was kind of, this positive psychology meets digital detox. And the idea of, what are my life values? And when I'm living my life on my phone, how does that or does that not align with values? And so that's something also, again, worth sort of thinking about and has a lot of reflection in it. Digital minimalism, like I want to say like 1,000 reviews, so very well reviewed, have not read that yet. Joy of missing out, that's kind of a take on the whole FOMO, right? Fear of missing out has now turned into the joy of missing out, which I love, just kind of that whole reframe. And then I have just a couple, again, my citations of the book and the detox deck, and I have a couple of the millennial media blogs that I put up. So how to help teens find the new normal, practicing self-care, and also, because I'm an admitted introvert, I may not always appear to be an introvert, but I am. And I say that, what happens, for example, when social distancing is your norm, right? And kind of a conversation around that as well. Because again, not all for some teens, right? There's been this joke of like, for the introverts, this is a dream come true. I get to stay home, I don't have to talk to people, I don't have to see people. Again, that can become unhealthy in another way, so we don't want that either. But we don't want to just escape into our devices because that's so easy for us to do. So also a link that I wanted to put up here to potentially watch at the end of the presentation. So how social media is impacting your brain right now. 2-minute clip, fantastic. Totally stole it from another presenter. I wanted to feed you and I loved it. It was like one of those little comics with like, you know, all these amazing statistics. And it was basically about how there is that sort of dopamine hit, right? Every time we go on social media and kind of how it's creating that addiction-like behavior in our brain. So again, highly recommend that as well. And with that, I thank you all and am open to any questions, additional resources, anything that I can help with.
Thank you so much, Goali. That was great. So many resources. We have some extra time here, so we'll wait for anybody to type in questions if they have those for you. While we wait, I'll just remind everyone to please click on the survey link after you leave us today. And as a reminder, you'll get an email with the recording of today's presentation, and you can also access those on YouTube. Remember, those are fully captioned, so you can also share them widely. Goali, you did mention the DBT form of intervention, and so I also wanted to remind our viewers that we did a brief DBT webinar, which is also available on our YouTube channel. Just if you search Strengthening the Heartland, you'll find that as well. Another thing, as I was listening to your presentation, I really liked the urgent, not urgent matrix and kind of going through those with a teen. And I thought about, you know, if they're making really small changes, how nice it would be to go through that with them as like, look, you made this small change and something happened. So I wondered if there were, you know, resources that you have maybe in your workbook for going back and like talking through what has changed with the teen after even doing some of these small interventions.
Absolutely, and I think that's, you know, an excellent point. A lot of that piece of, again, reinforcing the positive, right? Because it's so easy for teens to just go right past it. And that's where, you know, I love also, I'm working on a book right now on positive psychology teens, right? Because that whole idea of savoring, wow, this was a huge step. And then it's all the small steps that lead to the bigger pieces, right? And kind of seeing that, hey, when you did this thing, look at all these things that happened. And I know, especially in the therapy world, we're always kind of reinforcing that. And that's where I even love just starting a list of here are all these positive things that I've done. And again, I think that's where I'm a big fan of just kind of that workbook and handouts and writing it all down, because it can be so easy for teens to forget. And again, move on to the next thing, move on to the next thing.
Yes, for sure. The handouts that you shared also, oh, I thought I was on mute. I'm sorry. The handouts that you shared were really useful too. If people had a chance to look at those, they were just pages and pages of resources. So I wanted to thank you for sharing those with us. I think those will be so useful to use afterwards.
Absolutely.
All right. And I'm not seeing too many questions pop up here. The survey link is available in the chat box. You'll also get that in the email that we send as a follow-up. But if there's nothing else, I won't keep you on this day. We talked earlier, maybe not be quite as warm in Oregon right now as it is in South Dakota, but it's a very warm day here. Oh, and I spoke too soon. We're going to get a couple in here. Any ideas on how to get parents on board for detoxing their children if they also need a detox? So convincing the youth and also convincing the parents.
Absolutely. Well, you know, I think that's where it's having that conversation, kind of, you know, that assessment piece of like digging deep, right? What are things that the parents are identifying that are not going well, right? Are there things that they're finding to be triggering? You know, did an article one time about the whole idea like the millennial moms and how again like all of these different generations have their little social media worlds that most people are not very happy. That whole highlight reel of social media. Most of us don't feel great after being on social media, right? And so again, it can just be this almost addictive type of thing that we don't really cognitively think about. And so again, it's kind of thinking about what are the things in my life that are maybe not so ideal that can get better by going off of it, right? Because there has to be a why. There has to be a motivation for it, you know? And again, I think a lot of times we're on autopilot. And it's this idea of, well, I don't know what I would do if I was not on my phone, right? Because it's such an ingrained part of our lives. And that's where, though, again, once you start digging, people will say, my husband and I are always saying, why aren't we reading more books? We love to read. We're big, academics. And it's so easy, though, to read the NPR article on your phone, to read this CNN article on your phone. And so you have all these little articles, but the bigger things are not happening. And so kind of seeing, hey, what are the things that you feel like could improve in your life? And really weeding in how the screen time is taking away from the achievement of those goals.
That's for sure. It looks like we have a lot of thank yous to you, Goali. Some very positive feedback in the comments for you. So I don't see any other questions in here, but I want to thank you again for sharing all of this with us. It's so timely, even more now than when we originally talked. So thank you so much.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again. It's been my pleasure, and I have absolutely loved being able to share again as many resources and as many tools. And I have my email. I also the only real social media that I do is Twitter, just because I feel like it's the least triggering. Generally, not that any social media is not, but that if there's any individual things I can help with, I'm always happy, and feel free to shoot me an email, Twitter, whatever works.
Wonderful. All right. Thank you so much and have a wonderful day.
You too. Take good care.